Buddy JC here, and welcome to another Thursday night live stream. And tonight, I thought we would kind of focus our attention on the Haslab, which I've really been watching the numbers on this one here recently. And to me, I would say that this Haslab is in trouble. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not going to sit here and say it's not going to get funded, but it definitely each day it seems less and less likely to me that it's actually going to reach the 10,000. Now, that's just based on the numbers I'm seeing here. So I'm kind of looking. I look back at going back to September 23rd last week, and basically on the 23rd, this thing had 5,053 backers, and right now you can see that it's at 5,401 backers. So if you just do some quick math here, it's averaging, somewhere in the neighborhood of, I would say, 70 to 80 backers right now a day. And it's got about 25 days left. So, math wise, it's not looking good. Now, that's not to say that, there'll be a bit of a boost at the end of the campaign. These campaigns always get that kind of boost at the end. But even with that, I'm not convinced that this is going to actually get to the 10,000 minimum backers. Now, one thing I don't know, one thing that's not clear to me is sometimes it seems like Hasbro waits to put their overseas sales, from the Hasbro Pulse websites outside of the U.S. And then there's retailers that they work with where Hasbro Pulse isn't available, so they'll have some retailers sell these in those places. And so sometimes it seems like they wait till the very end to throw in those numbers. And if that's the case, then this might have a much better chance of getting funded. But right now, just based on these numbers that are in front of us at the moment, like I said, it's seeming kind of doubtful that we might get to that 10,000. And even if we do, even if we eke over the 10,000, it's still not doing anywhere near as well as, like, say, this year's GI Joe Classified Haslab, which got met its minimum goal in just like a day. And even the Star Wars Vintage Collection Ahsoka Ghost Ship, that basically got the minimum goal in just a couple of days. I don't remember what the Transformer one, how long it took the Transformer one to reach its minimum goal. I think that one took a little bit longer, but but uh but definitely, compared to GI Joe and Star Wars, this one is not performing that well. So even if we get over the 10,000, it's still, to me, would strike me as this is kind of a struggling HasLab campaign. So why is that? Why is this HasLab campaign not doing that great? It's lower price, but is it really lower price? I mean, I hear people, oh, it's only $200 um, to get this thing, to buy this thing, which is much cheaper than like Galactus and the Sentinel and even last year's Engines of Vengeance. So, it's cheaper. People were complaining about the price, right? And it's cheaper. But to me, it's not cheaper. It's you're getting less. And I know people like to argue this point, but I've said this many times that the stretch goals are not free. They're not free those aren't just being thrown in for free. I know that's kind of how they market it. It's all, I mean, this whole crowdsourcing thing is basically just marketing. Honestly, it's basically Hasbro taking pre-orders and making sure they get enough minimum pre-orders, and then they do these stretch goals. But that price that they list with the initial item, I'm telling you, it is incorporating the stretch goals that they include. So this year, in the past years, we got some pretty good, extra figures and stuff with the stretch goals. So, if you compare it to the Sentinel and Galactus, you got a couple of things. So you've got the Sentinel and the Galactus were both taller and bigger figures, not like hugely bigger, but they were technically bigger. Both of them also had electronics in it, so that also, factors into the cost. But then you got all the figures. You can see Galactus behind me there with all the the Herald figures that ended up getting included, and so that's where you get your higher price. So yeah, this one's $200, but the only thing you're going to get extra if it reached the stretch goals is 2 extra faceplates. I mean, that's not really all that super of an add-on. And that, that also, you know there's nothing here. Like, you might say, well, it'll start picking up backers, and again, it probably will get back a little bit more backers before it ends. But we know everything about this Haslab campaign. There's nothing like, oh well, maybe there's a really cool stretch goal that will entice more people to come in and back this thing, and I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I guess Hasbro could surprise us and say, or maybe they start getting so desperate that they come up with something. But if it's like one of those situations where, like, they're like, oh my God, this isn't going to get funded, we got to try and throw something else in there to try and entice people, it's probably not going to be anything super cool. They're not going to like start going into production on a figure all of a sudden that they hadn't planned to include with this one. So it would be something kind of probably cheesy if they ended up throwing in anything more at the very end, in my opinion. So that's really, to me, this really isn't cheaper per se. You're just getting less with this particular Haslab. So I mean, if you truly don't have, $350 to spend on a figure, well, I mean, to me, it's kind of hard to say, you don't have $350, but you have $200 to spend on a figure. So I don't know. I feel like people spend too much time focusing on the price of these things. And honestly, as I've said many times before, it's not really about the price. It's how many people are actually really interested in buying whatever Hasbro's presenting us. So that kind of brings me to my question. Whose fault if this doesn't get funded, whose fault is it? Is it the collecting community? And I'm not gonna lie, the especially Marvel Legend collecting community over the last several years has gotten very jaded. It's become very splintered. You've got those who, I won't say hate on everything Hasbro does, but they seem to go out of their way to focus on anything negative Hasbro does as opposed to positive. And then, of course, you have the flip side of that. You've got the people that are always singing the praises of Hasbro and Marvel Legends and stuff. So you've gotten, a community that's become very splintered. But I don't think that's really the problem here, because I got to be honest with you, and I don't mean to burst anyone's bubbles, but I don't think there's anybody out there, there's no influencers, there's no YouTubers out there that are really influencing people that greatly one way or the other. You guys know what you want and what you don't want. And so if you looked at this Giant Man and you're like, yeah, that's a figure I've really wanted, and it's a character I've always loved, and he's a founding member of the Avengers, and I want to add him to my team. If somebody comes up here and starts saying this thing's a total ripoff and you're not getting your money's worth and blah 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 blah, you're still probably going to buy this figure, and vice versa. If you're looking at this and you're going, oh, this is not something I'm really that interested in. I've never really been that big of a Giant Man fan. I already have the Hasbro Giant Man, the more modern one that's 12-inch, and that's fine with me. Or I have the Toy Biz Build-A-Figure of the classic version, and that's fine for me. And I don't really need a super duper tall Giant Man. He's just never been a character that's been that exciting to me. Yeah, I understand he's a founding member of the Avengers, but I've got Ant-Man, I've got various other Hank Pym figures that Hasbro's done over the years, and I'm good. So even if you've got somebody that's sitting there telling you how great this figure is, and don't worry about the money, you won't have to pay for it until the campaign ends, things like that, it does, you're probably not going to change your mind. You're going to be like, yeah, I'm going to pass on this. It's just not something I'm that interested in. So once you get past all the hubbub of all the YouTubers on both sides of these arguments, I don't think they're really changing too many people's minds. People who've already gravitated to not liking this are going to gravitate to the people that are finding some reason to not like it. And then those who like it are going to gravitate to the people who do like it. But I think most of us are smart enough to be able to make up our own minds and determine whether this is something we want to add to our collection or not. And so at the end of the day, both last year and this year, Hasbro is the one to blame because they basically did not come up with something. Well, we'll say last year, definitely. This year, it's still undetermined. We'll wait and see what finally happens. But definitely last year, and I'm seeing kind of the same thing this year, where Hasbro just did not come up with something that was appealing, had a wide enough appeal, because there's always people that want these things no matter what. I don't care what character you come up with. You could throw out a character of any name and somebody will be like, yeah, I really want that character. So obviously there's definitely people out there that want Giant Man. There were people out there that wanted Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider and his car last year, but there just weren't enough of them to, fund the project. So at the end of the day, it's on Hasbro for not having picked something that was going to reach be appealing to a wide enough people to get this thing funded. And it's pretty much that simple to me. I'm not bashing Hasbro. I feel like they could have come up with better ideas than this. I think a Fing Fang Foom, even if it had been more expensive, if it had been bigger than the original Build-A-Figure that took 2 waves to build, and had some really cool effects or something, light up dragon breath or something like that. Again, even if it was priced on par with like Galactus or Sentinel, I think that would have had a much better chance of getting funded. I think if Hasbro had done something like, and this is something I think they should really consider, doing the X-Men Danger Room as a modular set. So you do one modular piece, you throw in a bunch of different accessories to build out, the various dangers that the X-Men have to confront in the Danger Room. So you can kind of switch it up, but you make it modular so the pieces connect. So if you really want to build it out and like have a full, in scale Danger Room setup, you buy multiples of them. If you don't have that kind of space, if you just want something to take some cool toy photography or something, you just buy one modular. But it's like a play set, but it's like an army builder play set. So that, like I say, you can either buy one or you can buy multiples. You can buy 5 to have, like I say, a truly in scale X-Men Danger Room or something. And you could either, price wise, you could probably, if you wanted to go lower price, you could probably make a modular piece like that fairly, somewhere in that $200 neighborhood. Or you could deck it out and have lots of different accessories, maybe throw in some electronics, things like that, and have it more expensive. But I think something like that would be, as far as Marvel Legend collectors go, would be much more appealing than this or last year's and Ghost Rider. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, and I've said this before, Marvel Legends, Hasbro kind of blew their load on the first 2 Haslabs that they did, the Sentinel and the Galactus. Those are probably the 2 most popular large scale, characters. The first one, the Sentinel, was a true army builder, so people, were building up armies for that. That was a no-brainer. And then Galactus is a very popular, villain, Fantastic Four, Avengers, all that. So those are probably your 2 most large-scale characters that you're going to come up with. When you start going to other large-scale characters like a Celestial or Giant Man or things like that, they could be cool. They're going to look cool. There's definitely going to be people who are going to want to buy them, but your numbers are going to start shrinking. So, Hasbro kind of blew their load on those first 2, and now they've been struggling to come up with something that's got that kind of wide appeal. And when it comes to Marvel Legends, because vehicles don't go hand in hand with Marvel. They never have. It's not something you've widely seen in any Marvel action figure line. So there's not a lot of vehicles. I know you always hear people say Blackbird, Fantastic Car, things like that. But again, you're going to start seeing those numbers shrink, because definitely there would be people that say, I want an X-Men Blackbird or what have you. But I think it's going to be much harder to get a large number of backers for something like that. So with Marvel Legends, I think they're very limited on what they're going to be able to come up with and still get that wide appeal. So that's my thoughts on the whole Haslab thing. Like I said, we'll have to wait and see if this thing gets backed or not. But I just right now, to me, I am very kind of down. At first, I was like, the first week, I was like, yeah, this will end up getting backed. But as I've been watching this, and as the counter has kind of slowed and really didn't get any kind of huge bump during PulseCon, and again, there's nothing here for them to show us to like entice. If you were like on the fence, there's nothing left for them to show us that's going to make this appealing. And honestly, when it comes to Giant Man, I'm not really even sure what they could offer that would be that great, especially if you take into account that any kind of like action figure stuff that they would throw in, that would have raised the cost of the overall project. So, I know some people said, well, give us like smaller versions of Giant Man so we can recreate him growing. But again, if you really think, is that really something you're going to want to pay extra for? Or, I don't know, a Wasp figure. I mean, we've gotten Wasp before, so is a Wasp figure really going to be that appealing? I mean, I don't know, but as it is, there's nothing left for Hasbro to really show off with this, so there's nothing really to kind of tip people over if they were on the fence or leaning towards no at this point. Arbor says, well, yeah, it's in trouble. Ryan basically said that they were counting on the tiers on the base price, regardless of the tiers make it or not. It's it's like it screwed us all. Well, again, the Haslab thing, it's all about marketing. Okay, Hasbro could easily just, well, let me clarify a couple things. So these are things like I've heard from time to time. So like, no, I don't think this is an item that Hasbro could get out at retail. I don't think Hasbro could get a Target or Walmart to carry something like this. Yes, big giant items, Target and Walmart don't like that. That's, I don't care if you believe me or not, but anyone who's worked in retail knows, if you've got something that's really big and it's not going to fit on the shelf very well, or is going to take up a huge amount, one item's going to take up half the shelf, retail is going to shy away from that. And when I say retail, I'm talking like the Walmarts and Targets. And if it's got a hefty price tag to it, then yes, again, it retail is going to shy away from. So no, I don't think things like this, most of these Haslabs that you see, are things that Hasbro could easily get out at mass retail. So going the direct route for something like this isn't a bad thing, but they don't necessarily have to do it under the guise of crowdsourcing. They could simply say, we're opening up pre-orders. They could basically be upfront and say, we're going to give you the base item, and then we're going to give you 4 extra figures, and this is the cost. And we're going to open up pre-orders, and then just preference it by saying, if we don't get enough pre-orders, then to be worth going forward, meaning, because one thing you got to keep in mind with, anything in manufacturing, the more volume you're able to make of something, the cheaper it's going to be to make it, because you get those discounts at those factories. The more, the bigger your order that you put in with the factory, the more of a discount you're going to get. So that's why when you get smaller run things, they're more expensive. I've seen some people talking about the Trouble Bubble, the G.I. Joe Classified Trouble Bubble, and how the regular version that was offered through Hasbro Pulse was like $10 more than the Tiger Force version that's being offered at Target. Now, as far as the actual toy goes, it's the exact same toy, just repainted. So why is it, I've seen people going, so why is it, why is the Target one $10 cheaper? Well, it's pretty simple, because Hasbro Pulse, the Trouble Bubble, the regular Trouble Bubble was offered as a Hasbro Pulse. Hasbro Pulse is not going to be able to sell the same volume that they're able to sell to Target stores, because if every Target store in the country carried just one Trouble Bubble, and likely it would be one case, which I think has like 2 Trouble Bubbles, that's going to be way more volume than what Hasbro Pulse would be able to move for the regular version. So they're making a lot more of those Tiger Force versions than the regular version, and therefore they get a little bit, it's a little bit cheaper to make, and therefore that's likely why you're seeing that $10 difference. Now you could, a good question would be, well, why did Hasbro choose to release the regular version as a Hasbro Pulse exclusive? Why didn't they release that to Target and do like the Tiger Force one through Pulse? And my best guess is because Target, the deal with Target was doing all Tiger Force stuff, and therefore that's why they did the Tiger Force version through Target. And that's just complete guess. The only reason why Target is carrying the Trouble Bubble at all is because it's their exclusive. If they didn't have the exclusive on that, they probably wouldn't even bother carrying it. If like they knew everyone else, if they were going to have to compete against everyone else to sell that, they'd be like, well, we're never going to sell enough of these if everyone is selling it, and therefore we're not going to carry this item. So the only way Hasbro even got that Target to probably carry that to begin with is because it was a Target store exclusive. Again, why the Pulse, why Hasbro chose to do the regular version is only a Hasbro Pulse one. Like, why didn't they at least offer it to other online e-tailers like Big Bad Toy Store and Entertainment Earth? And I wouldn't be surprised if eventually it shows up at those places. The unsold merchandise that Hasbro, doesn't sell through will likely eventually end up at places like Big Bad Toy Store and Entertainment Earth. And the only thing I can think to that is because Hasbro is desperately trying to pimp out their Hasbro Pulse website. They are trying, everybody has moved to this model ever since COVID and the pandemic and everyone started buying online. Everybody has moved to this model where they're trying to desperately sell directly to the consumer. Essentially trying to cut out the middlemen, the retailers, so that they can get you to buy directly from them. And I don't think that's good for the hobby in the long run, but that is definitely something you've seen with almost every toy company in the last few years, and especially Hasbro. Hasbro, I've seen people ask, well, why does Hasbro do the PulseCon thing? Why don't they just like do regular live streams? Why do we have to have this like 7-hour event where filled with fluff that nobody really cares about? Well, first of all, I don't know if I know a lot of people paid attention to all the obnoxious comments in the video, but if you looked at how many people are actually watching that video, it was somewhere at one point it got up to over 20,000 people at one time were watching that video. That's far more than any of their individual live streams get, okay? So just the event itself definitely brought in a large crowd of people all coming in to watch at the same time. But even more so, if you haven't noticed by now, Hasbro essentially uses things like PulseCon and most of their live streams as essentially a big advertisement for Hasbro Pulse. They barely even mention, other retailers when it's something that's carried by other retailers, but they're always sure to mention Hasbro Pulse. They're running commercials for Hasbro Pulse before the video. And then during the video, everything, come over to Hasbro Pulse, pay $50 premium charge so you can have a better chance of buying our stuff on Hasbro Pulse. Come get the selfie series on Hasbro Pulse. I mean, it's just basically they're using it as a huge commercial. They know everyone's tuning in to see what new products they have. And so they're basically using it as a big commercial for Hasbro Pulse to get you to try and buy directly from them. So that's why I think you continue to see them do that. I mean, originally it started because it was the pandemic, everything closed down, there were no live conventions and things like that. But I think you see it continue because Hasbro is still trying to use it as essentially a big commercial to try and get you to buy on Hasbro Pulse. But as far as the Haslab, they could definitely rephrase it in a more accurate way and just say, we're putting this item up for pre-order and this is the cost and you get all this stuff with it. As opposed to, you got to realize that there's a lot of marketing with those stretch goals. Okay. Especially if it's a Haslab that is doing well, because the hype of it where everyone is constantly checking the Hasbro Pulse website to see if it's reached its stretch goal, to see what the next stretch goal is going to be. People are checking the site daily, if not like hourly sometimes, to see that stuff. And they know that. So that's why they do it that way. It has nothing to do with being like a true Kickstarter, because yeah, they are covering their butts to a certain extent, because they don't, they're not going to, if they can only sell like 10 of these, they're not going to move forward with it. So, but they could still, people still do pre-orders all the time, and if the pre-order doesn't get enough sales, they'll just come back and say, guess what, we're canceling this pre-order because we didn't get enough sales, and therefore um, you know we're going to give you your money back. But when they do it this way, it's again all the hype, everyone's talking about it, and everyone's checking the Hasbro Pulse website to see where it is, how many backers it has, and all that stuff. So it's all marketing, and it's not really crowdsourcing in the truest term. It's marketing, and that's what they're doing. Profit. Tiger Force likes the, well, keep in mind, I think the Tiger Force Python Patrol is more Hasbro's doing, because keep in mind, the Target exclusive started out as just regular figures, and everyone got pissed because like Firefly, Beachhead, people weren't able to get those figures. And so I think it was Hasbro that came out and said, you know what? We're going to switch to this Tiger Force Python Patrol theme. I mean, I don't even know if Target knows that those are like variants of figures that are getting regular release versions. I have no idea if Target's even smart enough to know that these are essentially just repaints. But from the collector standpoint, having Tiger Force and Python Patrol figures as a Target exclusive is much better than having a regular character, regular Beachhead, regular Firefly, that you might not be able to find and get, because we all know how much of a paint. We know most Targets barely even carry GI Joe. A few handful do, and then of course they end up clearancing them out in like a couple days. But most Targets like mine barely get any GI Joe. I went into Target the other day, the only thing they had on the shelf were like 10 Tiger Force Dusty figures, and they were still being sold at full price. They weren't even being discounted. So I think the Tiger Force Python Patrol thing becoming Target exclusives was something Hasbro managed to pull out, so that they could still offer the regular versions in a wider way and still appease Target to give them something to sell as their own exclusives. So I applaud Hasbro for that, because like I say, I definitely want my regular versions, but if I miss out on a Tiger Force Flint or Tiger Force Dusty, it's not the end of the world for me. So, having the repaints go as the store exclusive, I definitely think is the better way to go. Saron Games Go. All those Avengers figures got clearance on it. See, that's another thing. Yeah, a lot of those at some Target. See, I hear people, oh, Target's discounting all their Avengers figures. You know what? I went into my Target. The only Avengers 2-pack that they had one Avengers 2-pack with Thor and the Destroyer, but it was still being sold at full price. Again, Target's distribution, or I don't know who's responsible for that, but the distribution of these figures is horrible. A few stores near the ports get like tons of stuff, and then the rest of the stores spread out throughout the country get barely anything. So I think it was only the Targets that had like a huge influx of product that of course they wanted to clear out because they were resetting their shelves, you know, and that's why you saw these clearances. But not every Target had these clearances, and not every Target had a bunch of those Avengers figures sitting on the shelves. In fact, I would imagine very few of them did. So, but that's poor distribution. That's getting everything at once, and then only certain stores getting a lot of the inventory where other stores barely get any inventory. So you've got some areas in the country that are starved for product, and other areas in the country that have way too much product. And instead of like fixing their distribution, they just, Target, it's just easier, let's clearance it out. So, I think that's what happened with all those clearances that we saw at Target. I'm waiting for Amazon, like on those Avenger sets. I would bet you money that Amazon will end up discounting those as we get closer to the holiday. So I am waiting for the Amazon where I can just order it online, and I hope to pick up some of those Avenger sets. I want to get the Sky Cycle to, because it'll be a cool display piece for my video game back there with the Avengers game, the Captain America Avengers game, where they ride around the Sky Cycle. So I think it'll be a cool display piece for that. I may pick up the Thor Destroyer if I can get it on discount. I'm undecided on like the Captain Marvel and or Photon, whatever you want to call her, 2-pack. And the Black Knight and Circe 2-pack, because like that particular Avengers team was a team that when I was reading comics was heavily featured in a lot of the Avengers titles. That was during the time where I was heavily reading comics. At the same time, I'm sitting here it wasn't necessarily my favorite Avengers team, and then like I'm thinking, will we ever get like a Dr. Druid figure or a good Gilgamesh figure to go along with to fill out that version of the Avengers team? And I'm like, I'm questioning whether we'll actually be able to finish out that version of the Avengers. So I don't know about those, but I definitely, some of those, if Amazon puts them on discount, I will pick up. But Dan Larson's not fluff. He did a great. I'll admit he did a good, fairly good job. I think both those two guys did. I mean, I could have done without any of that stuff and just give me the live streams with the news, but I think they did a better. They were less irritating to me than like the people Hasbro had hired in years past to essentially do that job. So I think they did a pretty good job there. But still, to me, I would much rather like just do your live stream, spread them out over the course of the month. We don't need them all on one day. Like having all those pre-orders on one day, it's like, why? Like, do one week where you have a Star Wars live stream, and then the next week do a Marvel Legends live stream, and the next week do GI Joe. I don't even know why they did a Power Rangers panel, because all they did was announce 2 exclusives that they could have announced with the rest of the exclusives. It was like, what was even the point of that? And with Power Rangers, it seems to me Hasbro has decided, instead of trying to make their own Power Rangers products, they're just licensing it out to other companies like Super 7 and 3-Zero and letting them sell the product. So you'll notice that like Hasbro has been pimping Super 7 figures and even 3-Zero for Power Rangers. Like they're actually even selling them on Hasbro Pulse and stuff now. So it seems to me like Hasbro's decided that they're, at least for the collector stuff, I don't know about the kid oriented stuff, but the collector stuff, it seems like they've kind of washed their hands of making their own figures, and they're just now going to let people pay them to make figures of Power Rangers. So it seems like that's what they're doing. And that's another thing that I think you're seeing Hasbro move towards, where they're more and more licensing their property, the ones that they own, not Marvel and not Star Wars. They don't own those properties, but like Power Rangers, GI Joe to some extent, My Little Pony, Transformers. You're seeing them license those out to other companies now. Like Transformers is still a big enough brand for them that they're going to continue to make Transformer toys, even while they're letting other companies make a select number of product. But Power Rangers, I guess their Lightning Collection sales were just not that strong. I'm making that assumption. Otherwise, I think they would still be doing them. So it seems like they've licensed them out to other companies and are just going to let them do the products going forward. So in other words, if you want to collect Power Ranger figures, you're probably going to have to look to Super 7 and their Ultimate figures, or if you want 12-inch figures like 3-Zero and stuff. But it definitely, to me, seems like Hasbro is kind of washing their hands of doing much in the way of their own collector-oriented Power Ranger figures anymore. Things like Indiana Jones, which obviously that line is pretty much done. The movie bombed, and Hasbro has gone complete silent on Indiana Jones. So, but they don't own that license, so we'll have to see if somebody else picks up that license. But I don't think we're going to really see any more Indiana Jones from Hasbro either. Target has Circle Week next week, usually in October, and maybe in Circle Week to have a $20 off, $100 purchase. Great time to buy clearance and regular price toys. I For me, I mean, unless it's online, my target. Well, like I did see the like when Target started clearancing out all those Masterverse figures last year. I did see those on shelves, but my Target just has so little product on shelf to begin with that they really don't have anything to clearance out. I mean, it's just sad, but that's just how my Target is. That's why like I tend to wait for places like Amazon to clearance out stuff, if for me to pick stuff up. MK, when will Todd drop the? I don't know, man. It's like every year he teases it and then nothing. It's like I don't know what the hell's going on with that, but that's like this is the second time now where he announced it like it's coming and then goes complete silent on it. So I'm really not sure if that's gonna happen at all. But but and I don't know why. Like I don't know. Like to me, Todd's like Todd desperately wants to become, to me, and I mean this is just my opinion watching him, but he wants to become a Hasbro. Maybe not a public necessarily a publicly traded company because he likes to be his own boss. I don't think Todd ever wants to have to answer to stockholders and stuff, but he wants McFarlane to be not just a small toy company. He wants these huge licenses, and he's always trying to find like the next niche thing. Like you can tell how like he's heavily invested in the whole NFT digital shit, and how that probably is going to completely backfire on him because I don't think people are really buying into buying fake imaginary digital pictures. And I get these emails, we're about to drop the digital Batmobile. I'm like, why would I pay money for a digital Batmobile? I don't get it. And even in the mainstream press now, it's starting to come out more and more how NFTs have lost their value if they ever actually had any value or what have you. So I feel like that was something Todd thought he was going to get on the, he was going to be, one of the first to really jump in and start for toys and start doing NFTs and stuff. And he really kind of invested heavily in that stuff. But I think that's going to blow up in his face. He's doing the sports figures again. I don't know if he was like watching Hasbro and saw like Hasbro drop the ball and he was like, oh yeah, we can do sports figures. And it was like, here, Hasbro, let me show you how to do sports figures, which I, I mean, I wasn't going to pay Hasbro's prices for those sports figures, but if I had just looking at the product, I mean, the Hasbro ones were better because they had articulation, but again, the Hasbro ones were like 3 or 4 times more expensive. So I don't know, but I don't know. Todd just seems like he's always trying to find the next big thing, which is not a bad thing, but you can get screwed. And I feel like again with like that digital stuff, he's going to end up getting screwed. And then, like I said, going back to the Kickstarter question, I don't know what it is. I don't know if he's like seeing these other companies do all these Kickstarters and he's like, he wants to get in on it, but then he like changes his mind. Cause I don't think that first Spawn Kickstarter went too smoothly for him. Granted, it took place during the heart of COVID. And so it probably was not an easy thing to actually get done and taken care of. But I feel like I say, I feel like he sees these other companies and he wants to do, Kickstarters like they're doing, but then he's like looking back at how much of a hassle and how many problems I think he ended up having with that first Kickstarter. And he's like, maybe we'll hold off on this and see how things play out. But I mean, like I said, second time now, San Diego is all like, here's our Kickstarter again. And then not a word afterwards. Okay, yeah, the dragon was today. I think the Batmobile was last week, but yeah, and I don't get it. I honestly, if anyone spends money on that, I'm like, I mean, I don't like to tell people how they should spend their money, but it really confuses me why you would spend money on something like that. And NFTs always to me have seemed like a huge scam from day one. I've never really understood what people thought was appealing, and it was one of those things where you could tell people were dumping money into the promoting of it and like trying to artificially inflate the value of the things, because that's how a lot of these collectibles work, right? You start putting out the word, look how much this thing sold for. It sold for like $1 million. So you could too, if you start collecting these things, one day you might have something that's worth $1 million. And so I feel like that's what they tried to do, and it just didn't work because it was just so ridiculous that people just did it. Maybe a few handful of people thought they might get rich, but I think most people saw, this is not worth spending money on. The MM1215 says he just wishes. So I guess you missed out on both the gold label and the regular version, huh? Then the Notorious UNC. Who's buying the new Marvel Legends wave? So which one? The Spider-Man No Way Home or that comic book wave? Going back to Marvel Legends, I just feel like Marvel Legends is in this rut, and I'm basing this mostly on my own feelings towards Marvel Legends and just how my lack of excitement for anytime there's a new announcement, I'm like, yeah, okay. And like a few I'll pick up here and there, but I have not been truly excited for a Marvel Legend wave or even really Marvel Legend reveals in some time now. And I don't know. I don't know if it's just me. I don't know if a lot of people are feeling that way, and I couldn't even tell you exactly why it is, other than I guess for me personally, I'm less interested in more modern characters when it comes to comics because I don't read comics anymore. So when it's based on a more modern story, I'm like, oh, it's kind of cool, but I don't really have any attachment to it. And then as far as MCU, I've just MCU has not excited me in some time, really since Avengers Endgame. So the figures don't really do much for me either. So I just, leading up to Avengers Endgame, I really enjoyed the MCU figures that Hasbro did, but and I had my favorite characters, Captain America, Iron Man stuff, but I just I don't care about a lot of these characters that are getting the spotlight now in the MCU. So it's just not really that interesting to me, and therefore I'm not interested in the figures. And that's a good portion of what Hasbro puts out is MCU related stuff. So I think that's a large part of it for me personally. But I just feel like you know Marvel Legends has just not been exciting for me. It's not quite in the same area as Star Wars, which that's another line that really I just have not been very excited about. Though I will tell you that like I've really been enjoying the Ahsoka series because I really like Rebels. I was a huge Rebels fan, so to me this is really just kind of a continuation of the Rebels series. And I really am interested to see where they take this, though I am constantly going, how can this move forward without having characters like Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker playing more significant roles? But still, I'm really kind of interested to see where this goes. Downside here is like next week's the last week of the Ahsoka series, and my guess is we're going to be left with more questions than we have answers for because they're going to stretch this out. But I have been Ahsoka series to me has probably been one of the better Star Wars series in a while. Um, you know, Mandalorian season 1 and 2 I thought were really good. Season 3 was okay. It wasn't fantastic. Andor to me is okay, but not fantastic. Obi-Wan was okay, but not fantastic. I don't get as excited about. Well, I won't say that always because when Luke Skywalker came on the screen at the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian, I mean, that was a fantastic moment. But like just seeing Darth Vader, Obi-Wan and Darth Vader fighting again, I don't know. I don't find that. Even like Anakin popping up in the Ahsoka series. I mean, it was okay, but it was like, I don't know. But I overall though with the Ahsoka series, I have been enjoying it. So, but again, I'm kind of dreading next week because I'm like, I bet you we're not going to get hardly any answers and just more questions. Ryan says, I think G.I. Joe has really hurt Black Series and Marvel Legends because it shows the quality of those lines could. Well, I my problem with Marvel Legends in general, I'm not going to say there aren't figures that have quality, but I mean, I think there are GI Joe figures that have some quality control issues at times. But my overall, it's yeah, and I know people, some people will disagree with me. Oop, yeah, subscribe, but didn't mean to hit that. Um, I know there's some people who will disagree with me, but to me, quality is not what has really hurt Marvel Legends in my view, as far as why I'm less excited about it. So I think it's more about character selection and things like that. I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying there aren't some quality control issues. I definitely, especially with like a lot of the female figures where the legs start bending underneath them because of the rubbery joints. That's very annoying. But that's not what really price. I will say has had some price and volume of product that gets released, because there's just so much stuff that gets thrown at us on a daily basis nowadays from all these companies. And so you take that huge volume of stuff that we're constantly getting, and then you factor in the price, and then you also factor in space. And I think those are the main things that have made me much more selective in what I buy and don't buy. It's less about the quality and more about, the combination of those three things: so much volume, higher prices, and then just running out of space to put things out. And I mean, Hasbro's, I mean, we often talk about Hasbro, but a lot of these companies do the exact same thing that Hasbro does. Hasbro's not really unique in what they do. I mean, everybody does crowdsourcing these days. Like, well, except for McFarlane. McFarlane only teases crowdsourcing, but he doesn't seem to actually ever follow through. But everybody does crowdsourcing these days. Mattel, Super 7, NECA to a certain extent. NECA really doesn't go the crowdsourcing item, but they're still offering these large items. They're basically more transparent about it. They're just like, here, we're giving you this at this price. We're selling it on our site. We have get it while you can. And I guess if they didn't sell enough of them, they would come back and say, hey, we didn't sell enough, so we're not gonna be able to move forward with this item. But you know, so NECA's a little more, transparent, but they're still doing the same thing with these large items. In fact, the party van, I talked about this yesterday in yesterday's news video, but I got the email yesterday from NECA saying the party van was about to start shipping. I don't know what that actually means. Like, are we talking about in the next few days? Are we talking about next few weeks? But soon, that party van, which I don't even remember when I even bought that thing. It's been so long, but that's going to start shipping soon. And I have no idea where I'm going to put it. I'm like, I really don't know where. I mean, I'll probably find a place somewhere, but again, with all these large items, I'm running out of space. I mean, I could start putting stuff in other places in my house, but I try to keep my action figure collecting confined to 2 rooms in my house, and I don't really want my collection spreading out all throughout the house. I mean, I just don't really want that to happen. So, and my wife doesn't want that to happen either. So. Go boy. Nobody's buying like they were during the pandemic. Hasbro will slow down because the sales aren't what they were 2 years ago. What we're seeing is still a pandemic moment. I think there's some truth to that. I think that's definitely a good point. Um, a lot of things, it was obviously the pandemic itself was a bad thing, but as far as like sales and like especially online, it was really kind of a golden age. Like I will tell you, ad rates started going up very high during the pandemic. My website's run on running advertising, and we made pretty good money during the pandemic because the ad rates, because everybody was online, and so advertisers started spending a lot of money on online advertising. But that's definitely waned for a number of reasons, but part of it's because the pandemic's over, people have started going out in the world again. Other reasons is because things like inflation and worrying about the economy. Is the government going to shut down? Things like that, which, always kind of scares advertisers. They start getting more conservative and stuff. But during the pandemic, advertising dollars were very high. People were buying a lot of stuff. Definitely, from that standpoint, the pandemic um, had some positive things to it. The downside of the pandemic, I think, far outweighed those positive things. But from a strictly online sales perspective, it definitely helped things out. So, um, but yeah, as we're moving away more and more from the pandemic, and then like I said, there's other factors as well. Cost, inflation is a real thing. I mean, I know some people like to bulk about, Hasbro raising prices and blaming inflation, but that is a real thing. And that definitely, has had a negative effect on things. And I think one of the things, I talked about how companies have moved to like trying to sell directly to the consumer through their own websites. Well, another thing that you're seeing is companies are adjusting to selling in smaller numbers. It used to be a company like a Hasbro or Mattel would never make something if they didn't think they could sell a ton of them. If they didn't think Walmart or Target would carry it, it wouldn't be worth it for them to make it. So they've adjusted their models. Companies have, big and small, have adjusted their models more and more, where they're making smaller volumes of product to a consumer demographic that has demonstrated over and over again has lots of disposable income and willing to spend that disposable income on things like action figures. So the upside to that is we are getting things that like 10 years ago we would have never gotten from these companies. Some cool, very cool items. The downside to that, again, as I talked about before, when it comes to volume, when you make things in smaller volume, that raises the price. So not only is we talking inflation, but we're just talking about how companies have started moving to that model where they're making things in smaller numbers to cater to the adult action figure collector, but the prices have been going up quite a bit. And, again, as they're throwing so much stuff at us, even those of us that have disposable income to spend on action figures, it really starts to strain the wallet. So, but that's definitely a trend in the since the pandemic that I've seen toy companies moving into is that, and smaller companies obviously would do that all the time. That's nothing really new for a NECA or a Mezco or Super 7, but nowadays you're seeing companies like Mattel and Hasbro do that more and more as well. And like I say, like 5-10 years ago, they would never have done that. Distribution hurts Hasbro, and the Hollywood strike has made it worse. The delay. Well, we haven't really felt the delays yet from the strike. That will come, but up until now, yes, distribution has sucked, and we're still dealing with backlog during the pandemic of product that's still coming out or still sitting in warehouses that have yet to be clearanced out. So, but yes, the writer's strike, which will delay entertainment properties, will also have a negative effect on companies that obviously put out product based on new movies and TV shows and stuff. So yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it's Crystar, like Crystal, not Star. Spelled Crystar. I've always, ever since a kid. I mean, I don't think I've ever Was there even a cartoon? I remember the comic as a kid, and I had one figure, and I always called it Crystar. No one ever corrected me as a kid, so that's what kind of sticks with me. But I'll take your word for it. It's not a property. Like I said, I remember buying one Marvel comic as a kid, and I had one of those translucent figures. You know, they were like this size, and it was translucent. I had one of those as a kid, but it was never a property that I was into as a kid. Um, but I'll be honest with you. While it's not it's not a property from the '80s that like I'm invested in, the figure itself is just cool looking. So I could find myself tempted to buy that figure just because it's cool looking, not because I'm a fan of the particular property, but just because it looked like it's going to be a really cool figure. I don't know if I will get it, but I might get it just because it's a cool figure. But as far as the property goes, it's not like I'm not hoping that Hasbro gives us a full on line of figures based on that property. Jerry says, "Hope I don't know. I haven't heard that being delayed. I don't know where it was. I mean, the strike's over now, so if like it was pretty much done, then it probably wouldn't delay it too much. But I don't think we've. I mean, have they actually? I don't remember if they gave us an actual release date for that series or not yet. So, but I mean, I that's got to be a nightmare because all those Marvel movies are going to get delayed. You know, so all those date. I mean, I know they already moved those dates a bit, but that was like that's when the strike first started. So I don't know. I mean, this strike went on for quite a while. And am I mistaken in saying the actors are striking still or something? I know the writers have come to an agreement, but I thought something about the actors. I don't know. I haven't been obviously my attention on things have been diverted quite a bit this summer with me dealing with my dad, so I did not follow all of that very closely. Rom Blake, yeah, Rom would I would definitely be interested in Rom. And Marvel Comics has been pushing like Rom reprints, so I could definitely. I don't know why they didn't do Rom because I always hear people say, "Oh, I'd love to see Rom figures." I don't, and at times you'll hear people say, "Well, there's like some type of like licensing issue or something," but I've also heard Hasbro say that they could do Rom. In fact, they did a like a 4-inch Rom as a San Diego Comic Con exclusive several years ago. So I don't know why they haven't done a 6-inch Marvel Legend figure this year. I will not be at New York Comic Con this year. I will not be at Toy Fair this weekend. I do have some people that are going for me. So like tomorrow, I don't think Hasbro is going to have much, but like Hasbro has, it will be at Toy Fair. They're not at the Javits Center, but they have a showroom that's off site in New York City and they're taking tours tomorrow. So I'm not expecting much. I don't think we're going to see anything new revealed during Toy Fair. Normally, Hasbro for Toy Fair will do like a collector event where they bring everybody in at once and they have everything set up in a big showroom and you just go around all the collector brands and you go around and look at it. But they're not doing that this year. So that makes me think that they're probably not going to have a whole lot in the way of new stuff. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if most of the product that they have on hand at Toy Fair is going to be more of the kiddie stuff. So again, if there's anything, we'll have it tomorrow up on the websites, but I'm not really expecting a whole lot from Toy Fair for Hasbro this year. And then a lot of companies aren't even going to Toy Fair this year. Like Mattel's not going to be there. I'm not even sure if like McFarlane is there this year. So like Playmates Toys will be at Toy Fair, so they're gonna have an event on Saturday. So like for Turtles stuff and maybe some Star Trek stuff, I don't know. But look for that on Saturday. Jada Toys will be there, so you know maybe some Street Fighter or something. Loyal Subjects if you're into like the BST stuff. But it is not. It's this year's Toy Fair is not going to be Toy Fair of old. So in fact, I just read an article today. I think it was in the New York Post talking about how they're thinking about moving Toy Fair from New York City to Los Angeles going forward and like how they really pissed off everybody changing the date from February to October. So I don't know why they may move the date, but it was definitely not a good move having it at this time of year, I don't think. But again, Toy Fair technically it starts tomorrow, but again, I'm not expecting tons and tons of new reveals from anybody. And then New York Comic Con, you know, like NECA will be at New York Comic Con. Hasbro's not going to be at New York Comic Con, but they will have the giant man on display at the Marvel booth. So if you're going and you want to see the giant man in person, you can go by the Marvel booth during New York Comic Con and see it. But Hasbro themselves is not going to be at New York Comic Con, meaning like the company. I mean, like Ryan Ting and maybe Dan Yun will be there at the Marvel booth, but Hasbro themselves is not going to have a booth or anything at New York Comic Con. So again, maybe a few things from NECA and a few other of the smaller companies, but I wouldn't expect tons of. It's definitely not going to be like on par with San Diego Comic Con or anything like that. And yeah, I mean, obviously, I have not been to a convention or anything since before COVID. I was gonna go to PowerCon this year until everything with my dad, but I can't say I miss it a whole lot. I'll be absolutely honest with you. I mean, those conventions were always work for me. They weren't really fun. I didn't go for fun. I went for work, so that's part of it. But yeah. So no, I will not be at New York Comic Con this year. Well, there were indications. Well, not Mola Rum, but Mola Rum. But yeah, there were indications that he was going to be released as a Target exclusive, but I think that might have gotten scrapped. So I won't say totally impossible, but it's not looking good. Like I say, I think Hasbro after the movie bombed at the box office, I think Hasbro kind of like washed their hands. I mean, that's the only reason why they even started doing those Indiana Jones figures is because of the movie. Same thing with Ghostbusters. The only reason they did the Ghostbuster figures and will do Ghostbuster figures for the next movie, but it's only because of the movie that they picked up those licenses. If it wasn't for those movies, they would have never done those figures. Linda Torres, have I seen the new Blade? As in the figure, I've seen images of the figure. I haven't seen it, and I don't have it in my hand. But if you're talking about the new Marvel Legend Blade figure, I have seen like recent images of folks who picked that wave up, have already picked that wave up in Hong Kong. So looks pretty good. Definitely looks pretty good. I mean, I have the last Blade figure that they did, which was pretty good. But and that Iron Man figure from that wave, that wave, that same wave, the video game Iron Man. At first, I was like, yeah, that looks kind of dumb, but then when I saw close up pictures of it, I was like, actually, that's kind of cool looking. I don't know if I'll get it, but it was actually kind of like the little designs on it, like the writing on it and stuff. I guess like magic spells or something. I've not played the game, so I'm not sure what's up with that, but it looked kind of cool. Jerry says he got Indiana Jones at $12 at Target. I will tell you, so Hasbro sent me a box. Like I don't get much stuff from Hasbro these days, but they did end up sending me one of the marketing teams ended up sending me a box like back in June or July with the first wave of Indiana Jones figures, and I haven't even opened them yet. I was going to, but I everything that happened with my dad, so those are still sitting in the package. Um, and then like I may pick up the Sean Connery figure. I really wasn't. I didn't think they were going to be able to do the Sean Connery figure, so I may end up getting that one. But I did not. I was not heavily in on the Indiana Jones stuff. I still haven't even seen the movie yet. I'm waiting for the movie to come out on Paramount Plus. Like I know it's available for rent now or to buy. I mean, it's not available for rent, but you can buy it at home for like $20. But I'm like, I'll wait a few more weeks and I'll just watch it on Paramount Plus. But I have not yet seen the new movie. But everyone I talked to who said they saw it said either at best it was like it was okay, or other people was like, yeah, it totally sucked. But I really didn't see anyone that said, oh yeah, this was a great movie. I don't know if it sold well. It may have. I mean, I haven't seen sales number for the line. I will say, like the Indiana Jones figures, I've not seen warming the pegs like the Ghostbuster stuff did. So it does seem to have moved a little better than Ghostbusters, but I don't know how expensive that license is for Hasbro to do those. And like I said, I I, I would I would bet money that the only reason Hasbro even did those figures is, because of the movie, and they, obviously they have Star Wars, so the Star Wars and Indiana Jones kind of go hand in hand. So, they did it for the movie, but and I'm sure Disney wanted them to do it to help promote the movie, but I think that's the only reason why they did them. The notorious you. I can't imagine paying almost $800 for a Mattel toy. I, I guess I would need more reference on which Mattel toy. I can't see myself spending $800 on a Mattel toy either, but I'm not sure which Mattel toy you're talking about. Well, Hasbro wasn't the first, okay? I mean, Hasbro wasn't the first to roll. Well, yeah, I guess maybe now thinking back, maybe they were. I mean, as far as big companies, I mean, obviously a lot of small guys were doing Kickstarters long before Hasbro started doing the Haslab. But I'm trying to think. Mattel, it, correct me if I'm remembering incorrectly, but didn't Mattel crowdsource the original Classics Grayskull playset? I want to say they crowds, or maybe not crowdsourced, but basically said we needed a minimum number of orders before we would move forward with it or something like that. I mean, Mattel was the first one, they started Mattel Creation, or not Mattel Creations, but Matty Collector, where they were trying to sell directly to the consumer. So they were kind of the first big company to try that model, but it didn't, I don't think it worked out that great. So they kind of put it on hiatus, but then later brought it back as, Mattel Creations. Jerry says the 6-inch movie Ghostbusters looked great. Face sculpts were spot on. Bought a second set when they went on clearance. Not the old guys. I I don't I didn't buy any of those. I'm just not that huge of a Ghostbuster fan, so I've never been too interested in buying Ghostbuster figure. I probably would be more interested in buying like the real Ghostbuster figures over movie Ghostbuster figures. And I also, the other thing about Ghostbusters is just so many companies have done Ghostbusters in recent years. Diamond Select Toys, Mezco, Mattel, Hasbro. I mean, it's just so many different companies that have done. It's kind of like it's like Turtles, but then when it comes to action figures, Ghostbusters I don't think are nearly as popular as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But it's like everybody and their uncle do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures these days. So it's like to me, it's like too much. But I mean, I'm not a super diehard turtle fan. I like turtles. I collect some of this stuff, but I'm not. I don't live, eat, and breathe Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So suppose if I was, I would be, loving it. But I just, that's one of those properties where I mean, obviously Nickelodeon has been licensing the shit out of that license, making a ton of money off of it. But I just feel like way too many companies do product for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I feel like Ghostbusters was kind of the same way. It's just like way too many companies have done Ghostbuster figures. So it's like, and it's the same Ghostbuster figures. It's like the same, core characters and stuff that companies keep re-releasing over and over and over again. Lord Vengar, it doesn't seem like it. I think if there was going to, I mean, I won't say, we couldn't see more at some point, but right now it doesn't look like it. The fact that they showed nothing at PulseCon or San Diego for that matter, um, it looks like that's on hiatus for now. But I mean, and again, that a lot of that product was tied with the movie, and I don't know if they're going to try and do another movie. I actually liked that movie. I didn't watch it until it came out on Paramount Plus, but I actually thought I ended up liking that movie a lot better than I thought I was going to, the D&D movie, the live action one. So I actually wouldn't mind if they did a sequel for that one, but I don't know if it did well enough at the box office, and then Hasbro ended up selling off their their E1 entertainment division that they spent a lot of money on, and then turned around and sold it in a couple years. But so I don't know if we're going to see another D&D movie, but a lot of that product again was kind of tied to them doing that movie. So, you know, obviously the game itself is still very popular, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Hasbro puts out something from time to time. But, we've got NECA still doing D&D figures and stuff a little bit, so, you know, I don't know. But I wouldn't expect tons of stuff for D&D from Hasbro anytime soon. RoboGeek says it's holding out for the Mezco Turtle 4-pack. I mean, that looks good. That wasn't cheap. That set wasn't cheap, but those look pretty good. But yeah, that's yet another company doing turtle stuff. T-Glue. How about an 80s Clash of the Titans 6-inch wave? Well, if they try to do another movie, and like they did a movie, like they tried to bring that back, what, I won't say it was super recently, but like in the last 10 years or something. But I think it bombed. So Turtle Dave had gotten the classic Gray Skull Maddie back in the day. For was it that cheap? I don't remember it being quite that cheap, but I know that thing sells on the secondary market for like over $1,000 now. It's crazy. RoboGeek still pissed we never got a highly articulated dragon from Hasbro for the D&D line. You're not the I've heard a couple of people say that. Jeff Todd says 5,000 backers should be the limit. I assume you're talking about on Giant Man. You got to realize that that is all priced out. So, the way those things work is Hasbro, they figure out how much it's going to cost to make it. So they factor in all the expense of making it. And then again, going back to that whole volume thing, you know, yeah, it's basically they determine that they have to sell a nut like a certain number in order for it to be profitable enough for them to move forward with it. That's what it comes down to. So, and I obviously we don't get the individual costs of these things, or so we don't know. And some people will tell you that Hasbro's ripping you off and stuff, but I really don't think that's the case. I think they price these out to make it whatever their general markup on action figures is, so it's profitable enough for them. I think is what they end up doing. Again, I saw some people somewhere say, you know, the Giant Man somehow proved that the Hasbro ripped us off on the Galactus and the Sentinel because it's $200 as opposed to the 350 or the higher cost of those other two figures. And again, that's just not the case because of the factors I mentioned at the beginning, that it's not as tall, it doesn't have any electronics, and then it, as far as stretch goals, it really doesn't have much. I don't even really consider those two extra faceplates as viable stretch goals. I mean, it's almost kind of absurd that they came up with those as the stretch goals, but essentially they gave us the bare minimum on this one to keep the cost down, and that's why it's cheaper than the Galactus and the Sentinel. So it's not really, it doesn't prove that Hasbro was ripping us off on those others. It just proves that nothing's for free, and if you want really good stretch goals, then you got to expect to pay more, and that's just how it's going to work. And that's a fair question to ask to the community. What's more important to you, getting more even if you have to pay more, or getting less and paying less. And whether we're talking about Haslabs or we're talking about, 6-inch figures, you know, Hasbro could probably find ways to cut the cost on those $25 Marvel Legend figures if they cut something out. So, that really becomes the big question. What's more important to you? Getting more and paying more, or getting less and paying less? And, it seems like, I know everybody wants their cake and eat it too. Everybody wants more and pay less, but that's just not how retail works. So, but that's a fair question. If you want to ask a fair question to people, it's, what do you want? Are you willing to pay more to get more, or are you willing, or do you want to pay less, realizing that you're going to get less? But that's what this Haslab as an example highlights here is Hasbro cut a bunch of shit out on this one, giving us essentially the figure itself, and that's it. They could have done the same thing with Galactus and the Sentinel. They could have not included all those stretch goals, and it would have been cheaper. But which would you have preferred? I enjoyed the figures that I got with my Galactus, so I didn't mind paying more. Again, with Giant Man, I don't know that there's anything Hasbro really could have even thrown in that would have appealed to me personally. So probably it was smarter for them to do the bare minimum and keeping the price down. But again, I go back to, I just think Giant Man himself is just not widely popular enough that it's going to make it very hard for this one to get funded. But we'll see. And maybe there are more Giant Man fans out there than I realize, but I don't know. And it's also, again, another thing about Giant Man is we've gotten so many versions of Hank Pym. I mean, Hank Pym, we've gotten multiple Ant-Man figures. We've gotten Yellow Jacket's probably the version of him that we've gotten the least. Well, and then in the red jumpsuit, we've only got the one in the event West Coast Avengers box set. But I mean, we've just gotten so many different versions of Hank Pym over the years that it's just not a character that I really feel like I need another one of. Author Chen says, for a lot of collectors, seems like they prefer neither. Just done with the line of deep discount, I guess. Well, I do think if what you're saying is like people are just waiting more and more, just waiting for stuff to go on discount, I think there's truth to that. I mean, like I say, I'm waiting for those Avengers 60th anniversary figures to go on discount. If I didn't feel confident that they would end up going on discount at Amazon at some point, I might be more inclined to go on and at least buy the Sky Cycle at full price. But I can wait. Like it's not like if I don't have it right now, because again, I've got so many things. Like, I'm barely able to keep up opening the stuff as it comes in. So, and I mean, and maybe if only you collected Marvel Legends, it might be a little different. But I think nowadays, many collectors collect various lines. I'd be surprised if there are that many collectors out there that only collect one action figure line. I'm not saying there aren't any, but I bet you they're in the minority. I bet most collectors these days do collect multiple action figure lines. And so, it's not just Marvel Legends, but it's all these different lines and all that. So, like, I'm in no hurry. I would like the Sky Cycle, but if I don't get it until like 3 months from now, I'm okay with that because I've got so much other stuff that like I barely have time to enjoy it. And that's when collecting starts to become a problem, when like you're not really, it's like you're moving on to the next thing before you've even had time to sit down and enjoy the thing that you just got. And so, and again, that goes back to, how these companies have been throwing so much stuff at us all at the same time. I mean, honestly, when it comes to like these Haslabs, I think Hasbro would really be better if they stopped doing them for every brand every year. If they like alternated, like 1 year do Marvel, 1 year do Star Wars, or maybe even two, like 1 year do Marvel and Star Wars, 1 year do G.I. Joe and Transformers, and alternate back and forth. But I feel like doing these Haslabs for all these different brands every year is getting to be too much. And, I don't know. The MM is done with Mattel. Poor distribution and mass killed my. I've I the other weekend I put all my Masters of the Universe Origins figures in a bin. I was running out of space, and I prefer the Masterverse stuff over Origins, and I needed more room for my Masterverse figures, so I decided I was pretty much done with Origin. So like I haven't been getting any of the more recent Origin stuff, and I'm focused mostly on just Mattel or Masterverse stuff. And even that, like, I'm not necessarily picking up every single figure. So, um, but yeah, I mean, I was collecting pretty much all the Origins and Masterverse for a while, and now I'm just down to Masterverse. Storm Rising says, I really wanted Tommy's Master Morpher, and the pre-order's already sold out. You think Hasbro would make more? Like most of those Pulse exclusives, like when they sold out of their initial orders, they switched them to pre-orders. They didn't do that with the Morpher. That's strange. Somebody told me today they just got their Morpher in the mail, but the coins were missing. Author says, import is obviously pushing it, but Jada offers $25 with unique sculpt, shading, and multiple accessories and effects. Jada's Street Fighter line, I mean, so far I've only gotten the Ryu figure, but I, I'm waiting to see what, like, how many different characters they're getting, but like, I that's a line that I think has a lot of potential. Video game lines often seem to struggle. It's you would think that video, as popular as video games generally are, that a video game action figure line would be sell like hotcakes. But everything I've been told, from companies that have done video game lines, that's not necessarily the case. I don't know how many of you remember Soda Toys and their Street Fighter line, but that, they actually, pumped out quite a few Street Fighter figures, but that's actually kind of rare because those do not generally sell super great. Obviously, Storm Collectibles is a overseas company, and I think those things maybe do a little bit better overseas. But like, look at Tomasi Nations. Look how they basically how short lived their Street Fighter SH Figure Arts line was. So I don't know what it is about video game figures, and but they just don't seem to necessarily do that great. But I hope the Jada toy line has some longevity to it, and that we get some pretty cool characters. And like I said, Jada will be at Toy Fair this weekend, so I don't know if they're going to show off anything new, but if they do, we'll have coverage of that up this weekend. Ian says the storms are cooler. That's true, but they're also a lot more expensive. Yeah, comparing, like, if Jada Toys is even remotely as good as Storm Collectibles, I would say that's a pretty good thing when you then look at their price tags. All right, well, we've been going about an hour and a half, so I think we're going to wrap it up for today. As I said, though, Toy Fair does kick off this weekend. Again, I'm not holding my breath on tons of reveals, but whatever there is, we'll have coverage up, and I'll probably be talking about some, like, if there is anything new at Hasbro tomorrow, then we'll have I'll talk about it in tomorrow's news video. I'm not really expecting anything new. At best, we might get some better looks at some of the figures they recently announced at like PulseCon or something, but I'm not really expecting much in the way of new from Hasbro for Toy Fair, but we'll see. But as always, guys, thanks for tuning in tonight, listening to me ramble, listening to my thoughts on this year's Haslab. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not going to sit here and say definitively this thing's not going to get backed. And again, I also don't know if Hasbro's currently adding in their overseas sales. That definitely, if they have it, could definitely help get it over the 10,000. But like I say, right now, just based on the numbers that I'm seeing and how quickly like I say, it's averaging roughly around 75 to 80 backers a day, it seems like. And I just, unless it really starts to pick up the pace, I don't think it's going to reach 10,000 with those kinds of numbers. But we'll continue to monitor it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again. But as always, guys, thanks for watching, and until next time, I will catch you later.
Hey, thanks for watching today's video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell notification so alerted every time I upload a new video. And be sure to head over to the Toy News International and Marvelous News message boards communities. It's a great place to talk toys and win cool contests like $100 store credits to Big Bad Toy Store. And remember, action figures are great.